Imagine waking up one morning in the Stone Age. No phones, no coffee, no concrete ceilings above your head. Just you, your tribe, and the endless earth. Then suddenly, the ground begins to roar. Your cave trembles like a beast awakening. Stones crash, fire sparks, and before you can even shout, the world itself is shaking beneath your feet. No sirens, no seismographs, no drop cover, and hold on, just raw survival, instinct, speed, and maybe a bit of luck, because back then, Mother Nature didn't send notifications. She sent warnings through death. The first earthquakes our ancestors ever faced weren't just tremors. They were myth-making events. To them, the earth wasn't shifting plates. It was angry gods stomping their feet. Entire tribes vanished in moments. Mountains split open. Rivers changed course overnight, and yet, somehow, we survived. Now pause for a second. How does a barefoot, stone tool-carrying human living in a mud hut survive an earthquake that could level an entire valley? They had no technology, no engineers, no early warning systems, but they did have something else. A set of survival instincts, environmental knowledge, and ancient architectural genius that modern science is only now beginning to understand. So today, we're diving deep, literally deep, into how Stone Age humans without blueprints or building codes outsmarted the planet's most violent tantrums and lived to tell the tale. Because if they hadn't, you and I wouldn't even be here to talk about it. Picture it. 30,000 years ago, the world was raw and honest. Forests breathed mist. Rivers carved canyons like veins through the flesh of the earth. And somewhere in a valley where mammoths once roamed, a small group of humans built their home. They thought they knew the land. They could smell rain before clouds appeared. They could hear the whisper of predators in tall grass, but what they didn't know, what no human could predict, was the silent monster beneath their feet. One moment, the world was still. The next, chaos. The ground split open like a wound, trees toppled. Fires erupted, hills crumbled. The air filled with the scream of breaking stone. Imagine trying to stand as the earth itself becomes liquid. No escape, no pattern, no mercy. For ancient humans, earthquakes were the great betrayal. The ground, their mother, their provider, suddenly turned into their executioner. They buried their dead under the same soil that had fed them. And yet, somehow, they adapted. Because humans have one ridiculous advantage. We panic creatively. While animals ran, we thought, we observed. We asked questions. We started connecting patterns. The way certain valleys shook harder. The way some shelters stood longer. And somewhere between fear and genius, they began to realize something profound. The earth had moods, sometimes gentle, sometimes monstrous, but never random, and if you learned to read her, you might live long enough to tell your children where not to build their cave. That simple discovery, a whisper of observation, passed from one terrified tribe to the next and became the beginning of Stone Age earthquake survival science. When the shaking stopped, there was nothing but dust. Caves collapsed, fires drowned, and yet, in some places, small human groups stood untouched. How? How did one tribe survive while the next vanished into rubble? Was it luck? Or something more deliberate? Archaeologists have found traces of this mystery scattered across continents. Strange ruins, uneven patterns, abandoned sites perched high on stable ridges while fertile valleys lay shattered below. It's as if someone, thousands of years before science was invented, already knew where the earth breaks and where it holds firm, but how could they? They had no satellites, no fault line maps, just bare hands, animal bones, and intuition sharpened by terror. Maybe they learned by loss, generation after generation marking sacred zones. Do not build near the roaring mountain. Sleep where the soil is hard as bone. Listen to the ground. It speaks before it kills. Those weren't myths. They were manuals for survival. And buried inside those stories lies a question that haunts scientists today. Did our ancestors accidentally become the first earthquake engineers? Why? Guided not by data but by instinct? Or did they inherit secret knowledge carved in memory long before we began recording history? Every collapsed cave, every cracked stone, every strange relocation of an ancient village whispers the same puzzle. They knew something. Something we forgot. And to uncover that truth, we have to step into the dust, follow the bones, and listen to the silent language of the rocks themselves, because buried in those stones is the story of how humanity first outsmarted the earth. For centuries, archaeologists brushed dust from broken stones, temples, huts, and dwellings, never realizing they were looking at survival blueprints, because hidden in the cracks of those ruins lay the fingerprints of intelligence. Take the Çatalhöyük site in ancient Turkey, one of humanity's earliest cities. No streets, no open courtyards, just honeycomb-like houses pressed tightly together, sharing thick walls that supported each other. Primitive, yes, but also shockingly stable. When earthquakes struck that region, the collapse was limited. Why? Because those shared walls distributed the force evenly, a natural form of anti-quake engineering. Thousands of years before the word engineering even existed. Move farther east, to the rugged valleys of Iran and the Indus Basin. Archaeologists found that early humans deliberately built on hard bedrock, avoiding the soft, fertile soil that shakes like jelly during quakes. They gave up easy farming land, choosing survival over comfort. That's not luck. That's intelligence born from pain. Even in Japan's Jomon period, tribes built their shelters with flexible wooden frames that could sway instead of shatter. Thousands of years later, Tokyo's skyscrapers used the exact same principle. Coincidence? Or ancient wisdom rediscovered? And here's the wildest part. Early humans didn't just build smart. They listened smart. They studied animal behavior. The dogs that barked before tremors. The snakes that fled early. Some tribes even had rituals where they pressed their ears to the ground at night, feeling tiny vibrations long before disaster struck. Science calls it seismic precognition. They called it the earth breathing. Every discovery points to one truth. Stone Age people weren't primitive. They were perceptive. They didn't conquer nature. They collaborated with it. They turned terror into knowledge. And that knowledge became our species' first shield against extinction. All right, let's break this down. Because surviving an earthquake in the Stone Age wasn't just a test of luck. It was a full system of human ingenuity. They didn't have manuals, but they had instinct, observation, and community. So here's how our ancestors pulled off the impossible. Step 1. Reading the land like a living map. They didn't just live on Earth. They studied her. Tribes learned which rocks cracked first, which grounds hummed before shaking. Over time, they mapped safe zones, high plateaus, ridges, and caves formed in solid limestone. They might not have known about tectonic plates, but they knew which places never betrayed. That knowledge passed orally for centuries. Stories disguised as myths, warnings disguised as legends. Step 2. Building for movement, not strength. They discovered what modern engineers still preach. Flexibility beats force. Shelters weren't built to resist. They were built to dance. Wood frames lashed with sinew, mud walls mixed with straw, materials that bent, absorbed shocks, and stayed standing. Their architecture literally moved with the earth. Primitive seismic design. Born out of desperation and genius. Step 3. Early warning systems. Version 1.0, nature. Forget smartphones. Their alerts came with fur and feathers, birds going silent, dogs howling at nothing. That was the Stone Age push notification. Entire tribes learned to read animal behavior. The world's first early warning app. Powered by instinct and bark. Step 4. Rituals that saved lives. Here's the fun twist. Even superstitions had science behind them. When elders demanded everyone sleep outside during the full moon, it wasn't random. They'd noticed more tremors after certain weather patterns and moon cycles. So the ritual of outdoor sleeping? A smart seismic safety drill, hidden in spiritual clothing. Step 5. Community survival. When the earth shook, everyone had a role. Children were trained to grab fire and tools. Hunters secured the exits. Elders remembered which caves collapsed before. Survival was a team sport. In short, they didn't wait for rescue, they became the rescue, and in that system, reading, building, sensing, preparing always wasn't chaos, it was prehistoric engineering wrapped in courage. Fast forward a few thousand years, we've got satellites, steel towers, and Wi-Fi that collapses faster than a mud hut during a tremor. We think we're untouchable, We build skyscrapers on fault lines and call it innovation. Meanwhile, our ancestors, wearing nothing but animal skins, knew better than to build a hut on soft ground. Who's the real genius here? Let's be honest, the Stone Age had no seismographs, but it had sense. Modern humans? We've got 1,000 data points and somehow still ask, wait, was that an earthquake or the neighbor's washing machine? In Japan, engineers use base isolation systems that let buildings sway during tremors. Guess what? The Jomon people did the same thing, and with wood and rope. In Peru, the ancient Inca built Machu Picchu's walls with perfectly interlocking stones, so precise you can't slip a knife between them, and they've survived hundreds of quakes. Meanwhile, some modern buildings crumble after the first shake because someone cut corners to save a little cash. Stone Age humans didn't have architects with degrees. They had grandmothers who'd say, "Child, that cave shook last winter, a move." And everyone listened. That's ancient engineering with zero bureaucracy. They didn't separate science and spirituality. They blended them. Every myth, every ritual, every story was a data log written in emotion. And when the earth growled, they didn't curse it. They respected it. Modern civilization calls that primitive. But maybe primitive just means closer to the truth. Because while we stare at graphs and apps waiting for alerts, our ancestors were already out the door, holding fire, and heading uphill. No Wi-Fi, no panic, just awareness. So, who's really evolved? The ones who fear the earth or the ones who listen to it? Now here's where it gets fascinating. Survival in the Stone Age wasn't just physical, it was cultural strategy. Because when the ground won't stop shaking, you don't just rebuild huts, you rebuild beliefs. After every big quake, tribes didn't fall apart. They organized, they held ceremonies, told stories, and created rituals, not just for comfort, but for communication. Those gatherings weren't primitive worship sessions. They were psychological resilience meetings, disguised as mythology. Think about it. A village loses half its people to an earthquake. There's fear, grief, confusion, but the elders step up, beat drums, light fires, and tell the tribe, the mountain god was angry, but he has spoken. Rebuild higher. In one sentence, grief turns into guidance. Tragedy becomes instruction. And from that, generations learn where to live, how to build, and when to move. It's genius. Emotional intelligence wrapped in storytelling. And it wasn't just the leaders. Women became knowledge keepers, tracking animal behavior, memorizing which caves echoed strangely before a quake. Hunters marked safe cliffs with paint. Children learned songs that secretly taught survival zones. The entire community became a living data network. Without writing a single word, even humor played a role. Anthropologists found evidence of playful rituals, tribes mocking the shaking spirit by stamping their feet, laughing at fear itself. Because laughter, even in prehistory, was armor against panic. They didn't erase trauma. They danced on top of it. Compare that to us today. One alert tone, and half the city forgets how to use stairs. Our ancestors faced earthquakes with fire, faith, and strategy. They didn't just rebuild houses, they rebuilt hope. And that, right there, is why they survived. Not because the earth was kind, but because humanity learned how to stay unbreakable. Thousands of years later, when the world has changed, but the earth hasn't. The same plates still grind beneath us. The same invisible tension builds below cities, waiting for release, and every time the ground shakes, whether it's Tokyo or Turkey, Chile or China, we are reminded of a truth older than civilization itself. We are guests on a restless planet. Our ancestors knew that. They didn't live on the earth. They lived with it. They listened, adapted, and respected its rhythms. That awareness, or that deep humility, was their real survival tool. Modern humans, we've got sensors, satellites, and emergency apps, but sometimes we forget the most ancient skill of all: connection. When disaster strikes today, our response still echoes the Stone Age. People gather, share food, tell stories, rebuild. We think it's disaster relief, but it's the same tribal instinct reborn, the same emotional code our ancestors carved into their bones. Every rescue worker running toward danger, every engineer designing quake-proof homes, every stranger holding a trembling hand in the aftermath. That's the same courage that once kept a tribe alive under a collapsing cave. We've evolved tools, but not hearts. The instinct that once told us run uphill now tells us help your neighbor. The science that builds skyscrapers stands on the bones of Stone Age observation, and the stories that once warned us now inspire us to plan, to protect, to endure. The legacy of Stone Age earthquake survivors isn't carved in stone, and it's carved in us, in our curiosity, our creativity, our refusal to give up when the ground falls away. Because survival isn't about not falling, it's about learning to stand again, even when the world beneath you won't stop shaking. So here we are, standing in the shadow of the Stone Age, looking back at ancestors who faced the very ground itself with nothing but courage, curiosity, and community. They didn't have skyscrapers or sensors, they didn't have rescue teams or insurance policies, but they survived because they listened, they learned, and they adapted. Every crack in a cave wall, every trembling valley, every story whispered around a fire was a lesson written in survival. And that's the beauty of humanity. For tens of thousands of years, we have danced on the edge of disaster, not with fear but with ingenuity, not with despair, but with hope. Every time the earth trembles today, we carry their legacy in our science, in our community, in our resilience. We remember that survival isn't just a physical act. It's a mindset. It's courage wrapped in curiosity, wrapped in connection. So the next time the world shakes, literally or metaphorically, think of the Stone Age survivors. Think of their fires flickering in the dark, their laughter and songs, their wisdom passed down through generations. And if you found yourself inspired, amazed, or even just curious today, hit that subscribe button. Join us on a journey through history, through survival, through the stories that shaped humanity. Because every ancient lesson still matters. Every story still speaks. And together, we'll explore the mysteries of our past so we can understand the strength we carry today.